Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting. And we are back with yet another awesome episode and two brand new coaches to the show. I have the honor of introducing Kevin Thiele. Kevin is the founder of Sales Code, a consulting firm which helps technology leaders unlock the value in business-to-business sales teams. He is a fellow Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach and an ED Growth Certified Coach, and comes to us from his home in Bristol, the UK. Thank you for joining us, Kevin. Glad to have you.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Chad. I've been looking forward to this.
Good.
Welcome, Kevin. And it's my honor to introduce to you Samantha Berg. So Samantha is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Choice Bank, which is a mid-sized Midwest bank. She is Gallup certified and previously served as an internal executive coach and brings in CliftonStrengths into all ventures and practices that she does. She resides in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And on a personal note, Sam and I met back in 2017 where we were at Gallup together to be certified. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. So before we jump in to talk about this great theme, so I want to let everybody know we're here today to talk about the CliftonStrengths Talent theme of competition. So in your top 5, we know we've invited these coaches because it's in their top 5. Samantha, can you share with us where this falls in your top 5?
It is number 2 for me.
Number 2. And Kevin, for you?
Well, I'm outcompeted already. Mine only pops in at number 5. So
okay.
I'm behind the race already.
Oh no. Okay. Well, to get us started on today, I would love, Chad, for you to read for us the Gallup short description of the competition.
Yep. So Gallup defines this talent theme as follows: people who are exceptionally talented in the competition theme measure their progress against the performance of others. They strive to win first place and revel in contests. And you can already see that they're already comparing where their ranks are showing up. So this is going to be a very interesting show to see who sort of is looking to outdo the other. I will also just add as we start that this is my number 31. So you are well ahead of me in terms of if we're looking at this as a race, which I know we're doing in a friendly fashion here. Jen, where is this for you?
This is 28 for me, so okay. Almost just as low, Chad. So it's a good thing we have these two here because you and I know nothing about competition.
Yeah. So to help the two of us and our listeners learn a little bit more about this theme, I want to start off, Sam, I'm going to come to you first with this question, but Kevin, I definitely want your thoughts on the question I'm about to ask, which is that we know these themes typically do not operate in silo, but for the sake of starting to understand the theme and really how it shows up, I'm wondering, Sam, if you could start us off by helping us understand how this theme shows up in your everyday life. We'll get to where it can go dark or really help you excel, but just so where does it show up? What situations do you find yourself like, oh, yep, there's my competition theme, living its way out of me. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because we can all be a little competitive based on the different things we have and drivers, but competition in itself is, I think, so much surrounded by and rooted in comparison. And so it's measuring who we are, our accomplishments, everything we do, walking down the street, what we're wearing, everything that embodies who we are in comparison to everyone else out there.
Wow. That sounds heavy. I mean, Are there other ways in terms of how that has sort of come out in terms of, I think I've heard through Jen, in terms of other conversations you've had, that this has also been sort of a place in which like number 2 is not a possibility. What does that look like? How does that come out? What are your feelings around that?
Yeah, I do think it's somewhat of a filter that we easily apply to ourselves, those of us that have competition. Very similarly with strengths, we're supposed to focus on the things that we do well. I think competition actually helps us do that naturally, because we very quickly can assess, what do I have potential to be number one at, and what don't I have potential to be number one at? And we kind of sift those things out of possibilities and just go focus on the things we can win at, I would say.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's a great place to start. Kevin, what would you share or add to the conversation? or what resonates? What are you like, oh yeah, that's me too?
I think all of that resonated. What I see with competition is a need to excel and be the best. It's more important, but also to beat the rest, right? So it's not good enough just to be good enough. You have to, as Sam said, you have to measure yourself against other people. For me, but I think because it sits at number 5 and not number 1, I don't feel I have to compete at everything, but I particularly like to compete at things that I know I can win at. And therefore I avoid things that the many things, as it turns out, that I'm really not very good at. So a good example would be, because I have communication in my top 5 as well, I know that I can win arguments. Now, as a salesperson, that doesn't necessarily mean that you get the sale. Quite often it means that you can lose the sale by trying to win the argument.
Oh,
Wow.
That's a really good observation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Sorry, I'm letting that one sit, but I was actually just reflecting on something else you just said, which really struck me in one of the other times you and I have spoken. And it goes to that best versus win statement that you just made. I have deliberative, so I'm usually looking for sort of the best option to address up to a risk. And that often drives a desire for sort of the best solution possible. But what you're getting at here is the difference is competition is about the win. Yes? Or is there a little bit more you could add to that? Because I think that
I could add a lot more to it, Chad. I'll give you a couple of thoughts, right?
And then I see Sam's nodding too. So we'll get there
Sam's
too.
nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I picked a sales career very early on. When I interview people for my own podcast, there's a plug. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
No, please.
I often try and find how they came into sales, and very few people. I can only think of one person that ever said, I always wanted to be a salesperson. I am that person. I've actually interviewed 92 people for that podcast now, and only one of those people has said, like me, they wanted to be in sales. So one of the reasons I picked it, I think maybe it was partly because my father was in sales, and he had a very glamorous lifestyle, flying around the world in jumbo jets in the 60s and 70s. So it seemed great to me. But also because I knew I was good at it. I instinctively knew that I could communicate with people. I could win arguments. I thought sales was about that when I started. You just had to convince people, just influence them, but convince them, persuade them. But actually you find as you mature that it's much better to lead them and help them to persuade themselves. So my reflection on competition, like all of the things in my top 5, the tendency is to overuse it. So I try now to tone it down.
Oh, interesting. I love right where you're going. So Chad, if you're okay with me taking it on, I'm going to go right on to the next question.
Well, I would love to, but I saw Sam nodding to a lot of that
do we want to have
and I just was wondering that best versus win component. As soon as Kevin said it, you're like, yep, that's something was going on there. And I just want to hear sort of what was running through your head and what did you want to add to that part of that conversation?
So something that struck me with how you said it, best can sometimes look or exist without other humans present, but winning can't. And so for me, and I don't know if this exists for others with competition, competition isn't winning without the presence of other humans. So, that might be a little the component of living in the influencing theme, but it's in relation to other people. So you read a lot of those self-help books that say find winning for you and it's like, no, like that doesn't work. So, it needs the presence of others to have the fuel behind it.
Nice.
I feel like
I'm so glad you said that. That really does help clarify it a little bit more, that best versus win, there's got to be that other component, the other person involved. So thank you. That's really helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it speaks exactly to why it's in the influencing domain, right? Like
Yeah.
it's about, you know, the influence on others. And so, yeah, I could definitely clicks that now, because I was going back to something Kevin said where he was saying, you know, like he can only, or he like wants to compete only at the things that he knows he can win, where I feel like my deliberative does some of that, where it's like, if I don't think I'm going to do well, then I'm not going to do something. But that deliberative is holding me back over like the risk or the, you know, the fear of the failure, as opposed to the not winning, or you know, not being able to win at it. I'm not necessarily wanting to win, I just don't want to fail. So it's, yeah, it's comes from a very different place. I love how these
Yeah.
play off of one another.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to take us right into our next question then, which is, and both of you have kind of commented on it and hinted around it already, and we do this in every show. We know that our strengths have both a good and bad side. They're a double-edged sword. We can use them for good, we can use them for evil, and ways that they have tripped us up and gotten in our way. And so, Sam, I want to come to you first with this question. Where do you feel like competition maybe has held you back?
Competition has most definitely been the theme that trips me up most often, and that I have to consciously be buffering myself or toning down, I think, as Kevin has said, in relation to that comparison to others. And we've talked about before how human resources is not by nature a competitive field. And so having to, you know, competition naturally places yourself or others in the winning place. And I think part of that is an awareness of what others are bringing to the table. And so exposing some of that to place myself in first has potentially damaged relationships, damaged careers. And so there's a place you can use it to bring you success, but not bring others failure that you have to manage.
Oh, that's a really, really great insight. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sam,
Yeah,
I'm
Kevin.
curious. Oh,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I want to ask Sam real quick. You talk a lot about the professional side. Is there any place where this trips you up on the personal side, or maybe family life?
I think that's a very good question. And I think it would be an interesting, it's hard to not compete with those you're in relationships with when that's not what the relationship is about. So finding ways to utilize that to push each other toward greatness and better is the key. But if it starts to fall into me being better than you or me beating you, I think it can really become damaging in a relationship, whether that's spouse, whether that's children, those types of things. So, you know, I'm always assessing how my son is in relation to winning or losing with his peers, or, you know, and I know that's probably not helpful for him either.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, Jen and I have had similar conversations about how to, like, my responsibility has a big play on how I sometimes view my kids' behavior, and I need to tone that down. So I know that these themes come out in both our professional lives and our family lives. I was just wondering if the competition piece had an impact on family life as well. So thank you very much for being a little vulnerable and sharing that piece with us. Jen, I know you want to hear from Kevin, so I'm going to get out of the way now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, Kevin, and great question, Chad. I love that you brought that up, because yeah, we know it's not just at work where we use our talents, it's everywhere. And Kevin, I saw you nodding along and some agreements there when Sam was sharing where she has found her competition has tripped her up. I assume you have some similar and maybe some newer places.
I think the dark side of competition says it's not enough that I succeed, others must fail.
Oh.
Right, because if you think about it, there are two ways in which you can get to be number one. Either you get there through merit, or you get there because somebody else doesn't turn up at the final because something bad happened to them. Maybe their car blew up on the way, right? And that's, in a way, I mean, that's not good enough, because competition, if you've got values, competition wants to win fair and square, but sometimes that can be the dark side of it. I know that whilst competition has been extremely useful to me at work, because sales fundamentally is a competitive sport, and I was never any good at sports at school. So this was really the only sport that I can win at, right? But also there is an enormous amount of failure in sales as well, because you're specifically measured against a set of targets. Sometimes, and quite often, they're well outside of your control to achieve, no matter how hard you work or how diligent you are, or even how skilled you are as a salesperson. Sometimes you get a downturn in the market. It's happened 3 or 4 times in my career. So that can be very frustrating for someone who wants to be highly competitive. And sometimes I would have to admit that I probably come home and taken that out on my family in a way which is not a healthy one. You know, the frustration of coming home grumpy, things haven't worked out for me, somebody else beat me to the spot. That's for sure a dark side to this talent theme.
It sounds exhausting, is it?
No, actually, I wouldn't describe it as exhausting. I think because, I mean, with all due respect, Jen, you've got all that purple stuff there. I mean, that's heavy, right? The influencers are not influencing people with lots of orange. Generally, we're not. Well, I can only speak for myself. I don't want to diss anybody else, but I don't think I have enormous emotional depth as a human being, right? And right, and frankly, because I'd like almost everybody I meet, I can't afford not to fall out with people, right? But generally, the person that, frankly, if you ask me the one person that really annoys me, it's me. And that may be true of a lot of us, but I think competition can do that to you. That constant need to compare and contrast. I remember when our kids were little, I've got 2 daughters now in their, well, one's 31, won't thank me for saying that. I was at a coffee shop before this call, and there was a baby event there where these people from antenatal classes have got 6 of their babies and lined them up on a desk, right? And I thought, I can see why that's a nice thing to do. If that had been me, I mean, we didn't do that with our kids, right? But if that had been me, I probably would have been looking at those babies thinking, oh, that one's better looking than mine. That one's taller than mine. I remember being thrilled as a relatively short man that both of my daughters were in the 90th percentile of height for their age, right? I won't go on because I think you get the drift.
Well,
it's so interesting to hear the comparison. Yeah, like, and I see Sam nodding along like she's right there with you. Like, yep, we'd be saying which one's taller, which one's whatever. And I hear it like out of both of you, that comparison really is like something that happens all the time. It's really natural.
Yeah.
It's just present. And I think for me learning, because you're told kind of comparison is the root of evil, you know, growing up and learning that it's not. It happens all the time in my everyday, and just being able to manage how that looks like at the end is where the art comes in. But just to embrace it and live in it, it's not evil. It's a powerful motivator. And so just channeling it, which is why we're all here talking about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chad, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was just, well, the only thing I was noticing is, you know, Sam, you started off soft, you know, talking about your son at school in comparison. Then we get 6 babies lined up on a table, and I just saw that, like, we took this from professional to family life and how this shows up in all places. And I think the comment, I forget which of the 4 of us said it, but, you know, our themes are ever present. It doesn't matter whether you're at work or at home, out in your community, it's ever present. And yes, it shows up in a little different ways, you know. Sales is competition, or, you know, I can only imagine, Sam, I know a little bit about HR, deal a lot of HR people around my local community, you know, and all the metrics that come with it and trying to get to be best place. That's going to be powerful, but also where we're seeing it in terms of family life and, you know, school and so forth. So that was just having 2 young boys myself. I see that, and I can feel a little bit, but I can very much put myself in your shoes, at least a little bit in that family sense. So anyway, I know Jen also wants to take us to the positive side, especially since since Sam was just saying about channeling this in more positive ways can have a real benefit and driver. I want to hear Jen's question and the responses.
Yeah. So back to that, we're not using them for evil all the time. Like you just said, Sam, like it's a powerful motivator. What ways do you think competition, we know they don't stand on their own, but in particular, competition has really helped or benefited your life and work?
It is the strongest motivating force out of all of the themes that I have. And it's never being satisfied, which that's probably where some of the exhaustion comes in to some extent, is when you achieve that next thing, there's always the next thing to win at. It's very fleeting. You go win it and then you have to move on to the next win. And so I love it because it's pushed me in my career. However, there is a point when you start to ask, okay, what do I want besides just winning? And how do I find that enjoyment in life beyond that dopamine rush of getting the prize and then moving on?
Yeah. You've shared with me before too that being had a CHRO, you actually win different ways now.
Yeah, it is. Well, it becomes about team because I don't want to be the CEO. That is one win I don't want for myself. I know what they have on their plate, so I can make that decision. But it does become about winning as a team. And so it's winning through others. So I will let everyone know on this call and who's ever listening, the best damn HR team anyone's ever seen. And we know that and we're proud of it. And so that motivating force can come through and influence the others and the excitement and to know that we're not going to be the stereotypical HR administrative paper pushers. That's not who we are. And so the challenge for all of us on that team that competition brings. Even when we set goals amongst our team, we publish those probably naturally because of who I am with competition. We have some on the team that are like, gosh, like somebody has like 5 and I have 3, but what if mine are bigger and there's our smaller? And I'm like, it's okay to compare and it's okay to push yourself to maybe put another goal on. Like, that's okay. And so I help them channel a little bit of that competition, even though that might not be something that's natural for them.
Nice.
Oh, so great. I love that. Kevin, I saw you smiling along. In what ways do you feel like the competition has really benefited your life and your work?
Yeah, I think there's a contrast between me and Sam to a degree, maybe because of the order of the strengths that mine's lower down, which still annoys me for this purpose of this call, obviously. But what it gives me is an enormous amount of energy. I'm going to hold my hands up here and I'd be prepared to be shocked, right? Because although I tell people I'm 55, I'm actually 63. Mic drop moment. I know you can't believe it. And actually, I've been a professional salesperson for 40 years. Which is a long time. This is long after most of my contemporaries have retired, either with a massive, share payoff from some IPO that scaled and or for whatever reasons they've given up the ghost, right? And I'm still at it and I still love what I do. And I still love selling, which is fundamental part of my work, obviously. But moving forward, I think what it's given me, competition, is that enormous energy that you need to keep charging at something. And that's something when I've actually I had job interviews fairly recently, which is quite amazing. And the thing that people normally are struck by is the energy that I convey. And I say, well, okay, you'll hire people that have got the energy, but don't have the experience. Or you'll hire people that have the experience, but don't have the energy. I've got both. So that's kind of what I describe as my secret sauce. How it expresses itself now as a coach, a little bit like what Sam was saying, actually, it's winning through others. So my pitch to people I'm coaching, I do quite a bit of leadership development and career coaching now, which is very fulfilling. I want you to be the best. I want you to win. I want you to get to a position in a company that I never got to because I didn't fulfill my career goals. As Sam said, I had this great plan to be sort of the head of sales at Apple. Actually, didn't make that one. That's a long story. We'll talk about that another time. But I get my fulfillment from watching other people compete and win now. And again, because I'm in the sales field, many of those people are highly competitive. Not all of them, actually. Sales has changed, but a lot of them are very competitive people. And if they're not, I am, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. You know, something you said, your secret sauce of that like combination made me think of another time when Sam was sharing that she likes the spotlight. So I wondered if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about what that means as far as having competition at number one and being in the spotlight, having all eyes on you. Sam?
Absolutely. I think this leans a little bit into theme dynamics with significance at number 4. And it's an absolute comfort place of mine. Being in front of 1,000 people presenting feels no different than having a conversation with one. And so I think competition is just the knowledge of knowing that that's unique and knowing that that's my place to show off. And so I think I've mentioned in the past, I played basketball growing up, and I wasn't the best player by any means, but I was the best free throw shooter because you are on the spot in that moment, all eyes on you, expected to perform. And that might be that winning point that you needed.
Yeah.
And so those were the moments where I was thrown in to go get fouled and get thrown on the free throw line, and they filled me. And so that for me is that spotlight, but it goes in personal, it's in sports, it's in at the gym. I need to be surrounded with people, in front of people, comparing our weight sets, all of those type of things. I'm better, I'm just stronger. If somebody's watching me swing a baseball bat versus if I swing it on my own. So that's another powerful force for me.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Kevin, do you resonate? Does that resonate with you also?
Yeah, it does. I tried swinging a baseball bat and it didn't work for me. And also,
I meant the spotlight.
Well, we generally play cricket over here, which is a game that Americans have got no clue about. But I'm not any good at that either. In fact, I remember the school I went to. When you played cricket, is a kind of a bit like baseball in a way, right? So you've got a bowler and a batsman, and people out in the field. I was always in the field because I just couldn't bowl, couldn't bat, and I hated it because I wasn't making any contribution. There wasn't any spotlight on me. Really annoyed me. But of course, they wouldn't put me into bat because I was useless. So that's why I picked a field I knew I could excel at. Because I've got communication in my top 5. I know that making speeches is something I'm good at if I prepare thoroughly. Generally, I'm very good at coasting as well because I've got self-assurance, but it doesn't always work. And I do like the thrill of people saying that was really good. I remember the first kind of senior sales management position I had for a very good American software company. They put me on a media training course, and after an hour they said, "You don't need it. It sounds like you've been trained before." And that gave me a real buzz, actually. They said, "You are so good at this, we don't need to spend any more time with you."
Wow.
You're kind of flawless, right?
Wow.
So, but what I notice what I do now, because again, sorry, this is a relevant plug, because I run my own podcast, I started to critique myself. Listening back to yourself is quite torturous to some people, isn't it? So many people have said, I've got this, forgive me, quite sort of good sounding British accent, right? Particularly Americans. And so I've started to sort of not hone the accent, but try and trim out all the filler words that go in. The the oh yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? I just did one right, it's a filler word. So I've got quite critical about how because I want to be the best podcast performer. I want to be the best. People say, "Oh, that was really good." The fact that not many people, or not as many people as I would like, listen to it is a goal that I still pursue. But the fact that the critical reception is good, right? Again, this is a concept we haven't talked about yet, which is secondary goals. So not enough people listen to my podcast to make me feel happy, but the fact that the people that do listen to it say they really like it, that's good.
Yep, absolutely.
Nice. Wow.
Chad, did you hear both of them are leading us into our next set of questions, and I'm loving how you two are playing, and the differences coming out too are really great to see.
Yeah, I do want to take us to theme dynamics. I have to. There are two things I really took out of that last part of the conversation, though, is that it was interesting to hear that the secondary goals one was fantastic. But Sam, it was interesting when you first led off that said, "Oh, I don't want the CEO job. I know what's on their plate." I can immediately think, "Oh, she knows she may not be able to quote unquote win at that, so she doesn't want it. I don't know if that was the right takeaway there, but that was sort of what I heard. And then the other fun thought I had was, you were saying we've got the best darn HR team in the the country or the world or whatever. I was like, well, she's thrown down competition gauntlets, like the gloves have been thrown. So I thought it was a wonderful sort of celebration and demonstration of this theme that we're talking about. I do want to take us to the theme dynamics though, because both of you have already started to talk about that we highlighted this at the very beginning, that normally we don't talk about these themes in silos because they're always bumping up and melding with the other themes that we have. Sam, you've already talked a little bit about self-assurance with your competition. Kevin, you've talked about communication and competition. So I just want to sort of extrapolate on that conversation of, as we think about competition never working alone, are there particular themes, whether you've mentioned them yet or not, that have really added to the success or the ability of you to offer your best version of that competition theme? And so, Sam, I know you mentioned significance. Do you want to say anything more on that one? And are there other themes that you also find yourself tying in regularly to your competition that sort of help it be its better fine-tuned version?
I will say that with ideation at number one, Kevin, I think, spoke really well to his sweet spot. And, you just know where that is. And so I have an art degree and an education degree, and I'm in human resources for a bank. And so I have zero financially focused mindsets, zero. And so the value that I know I bring is in ideations, all about how my brain works. And part of that definition is about, separating seemingly disparate phenomena. And so I know my competition to be in the room, to be the best possible for the organization, is being able to make those connections across all scopes in the industry. So it's that driver to understand it and be able to provide insight and value that I think that has really led to, and just kind of the grittiness that competition brings in being able to just dig in and tackle, even though, you get teased for having an art degree and working in a bank. You just grit through it and you can provide that value. So that's some of the sweet spot spaces I like to live in, and just knowing things can be done different and using that creativity with it.
Nice. I love it. Did you, awesome contribution on ideation. Did you want to say anything more about your significance? I know you've already touched on it a little bit in the previous part of the conversation, but I just want to give you a little bit of extra room to, like, if there was something else you wanted to contribute on that.
I do think both being influencing themes are amplified when used together. I think command sitting at number 6 also really intensifies that significance in wanting to be seen, that competition and wanting to be seen at number 1. And then with that command, it's being confident in beliefs and ideas and how you got to the places you've gotten to, and just being firm in those foundational pieces. Command just bolsters all of that. So I think it kind of all of those influencing themes really support each other nicely, but very intensely. So it does need a little tempering from time to time.
Got it. Okay. We may come back to the tempering part here in just a second. So keep your keep your thumb on that idea. Kevin, what about you? What themes do you tend to bring into the fold or meld with your competition to get the most out of your competition talents?
I'd say, if you think back to the earlier conversation where I think Sam and I both said we try not to compete in areas that we know we can't, or we don't believe we can really succeed in. Sometimes even the best of us have a little bit of imposter syndrome, and we might think, we might actually downrate our capabilities. So whilst I'm not going to be a Major League Baseball star, let's be honest, with all the will in the world, it's not going to happen, because talent isn't everything. You do need skills as well. I would say that self-assurance helps with me. If I'm going into a new field and I'm not 100% sure I can really compete effectively, self-assurance comes in and says, yeah, Kev, you got it. You can do that. It's not that different to what you did before. Coaching is a good example. When I set myself to become a professional coach, I realized I'd actually done a lot of it anyway. It's like I've been coaching for a long time. I just hadn't done it the CliftonStrengths way. And so I think that really helped. The other area that really helps me to balance competition effectively is Relator, because it's the only blue relationship building theme. And it does, I do have still a relatively small group of really good friends. And I know that sometimes I can be quite overpowering. Certainly in my youth, I can still do it. Actually, I'm set on that mode because very orange, right? Lots of influencing, need to win everything. Particularly good at battling people verbally and making them look stupid if I want to. So I'd say those two themes. I would say self-assurance and Relator.
Excellent. Your last answer actually leads me right into the other question I want to ask around these theme dynamics, which is, and both of you have spoken wonderfully about how competition can go a bit strong. It has a tendency to get into that, top gear pretty quick and can get running down the tracks. We don't ever really want to rein in our talents, but we do often need to find sort of that Goldilocks zone, right? If you're running too hot, too raw, it has an impact. If you're not,
is that a Gallup thing, or did you make that up, Chad?
What?
That's a Chadism.
Yeah.
Is it a Chad? Is
the Goldilocks zone?
Yeah,
it is a Chadism.
Like, well, so I think
is that trademark Ahern Corporation?
No, but
I can use that there.
No, I do think of it though a lot. Given where I live, thermostats are pretty important. So if you have your themes or your house too hot, nobody wants to stay around. If it's too cold, nobody wants to stay around. So if you think about sort of that nice middle zone, in my house it's like between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit, people tend to want to stay in your house. And so I think a little bit of the themes that same sort of way of when we need to balance them out. Kevin, you'd already started talking about Relator and helping that figure out the right application of your competition. Are there any other themes that help you do that? And then Sam, I want to hear from you in terms of adding to the conversation, what themes might help you sort of bring it back into that more mature, better way of applying your competition. So Kevin, were there any others? Yeah, the Goldilocks zone. Kevin, were there any others in addition to Relator that help you sort of find the best application for competition in terms of finding that balance?
Well, in the interest of winning an argument, I could make a case for ideation as well, since I have that at number 9. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. So I'm going to be honest and say I don't know. I'll have to reflect on that, which is a rare thing for me to admit.
No, that's glad. I love that he started to poke the barrel a little bit with the ideation
right?
piece.
Yeah, well, I stole the idea off Sam, so I don't think it's really fair. Let's.
But I love the combination of the Relator with the competition. Making sure that you're not damaging relationships and really putting the other person kind of in mind as you're dealing with the competition. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it in your Goldilocks zone.
Thank you.
Sam, what about you? Are there any themes that help you kind of balance it out or find that ideal when it gets run away?
One, I think CliftonStrengths has helped in general because with competition, you have this comparison always happening. And if it's very raw, you're wondering why can't they do it? Why can't that person get better? And especially if you're leading teams, it's hard to understand that level of winning is not where everyone else is. So that winning first place is not where somebody else is going to achieve to be or strive to be. So I think Relator as well in Kevin. So that's my number 5. I think it also helps me connect with people individually to understand where they are and what they want. Because let's be honest, empathy is number 32, I think, for me. So I'm not going to sense it emotionally whatsoever. So I need to build a pretty strong personal connection with them to understand that. But then I think also, not maybe a buffer, but channeling it. Also, command is helpful as well. So when you want them to achieve things just as you want to achieve, and I've had this told to me before, people just believe what I say. And I don't know if I could be fooling a lot of people, but I don't know if it's because of that command and the firmness I say it with. But when I give a compliment to somebody, and it might be significance, it might be competition, it might be command, they actually have a tendency to believe it. Where I think most people are like, oh, you're just saying that, No, but like, I know that I can lean into those three things and tell them that I know what they're doing is valuable, and I can tell it hits different. So command is tough too, but competition sees that comparison and their actual worth. I feel like it's a lens that some don't have. And so being able to play on those others and help them see their worth as well.
Nice. Love it. Thank you so much. That's really helpful, especially for those of us that have competition basically down where your
Very
empathy
low.
is. Why, again, 28, 31. Yeah. So we're learning a lot here.
Absolutely.
As we think about the next thing, I know Jen has another question sort of having to do with theme dynamics and other people. Do you want to take us there, Jen?
Yeah, let's. So in the past, we've had instances where we've, coached others who might have the theme that's, the same as ours. But when we see it in them, it's really drastically different. It might be because of, some other themes they have surrounding it, or just their different use of it. In my experience, I wouldn't say that I've met anyone who shows competition a whole lot differently than what I've seen and heard and understand from the two of you. So I'd like to put that to you too. Have you ever worked with or coached others who have competition high where it comes out differently than yours? You both look like you're thinking. So whoever wants to jump in first, Sam?
I would say that the only maybe time I've seen this is somebody that has woo and empathy really close to competition. So it's all about winning that relationship. And that's generally not something I see off of competition. So winning others over, you add competition onto that, and empathy and understanding of people. It definitely took on a little bit different of a lens.
Wow.
But that's probably the only time. Usually taking competition in itself, it's for the most part, I've heard mostly the same type of comments.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting one. That would be an interesting combo to see at play for sure.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you have any?
I'm going to give you a politician's answer, which is to answer a different question.
Oh, all right.
Because the truth is, I don't know. I think it normally shows up. I did coach a sales leader. I coached a sales leader who, one of the very rare occasions where someone is not happy to accept what Don Clifton told them in their strengths report. And he was just really disappointed, frustrated, and annoyed, and in disbelief at the fact that competition wasn't in his top 10, actually. He said, well, I'm a super competitive person. I play in all these squash leagues. I'm a sales guy. I'm a sales leader. I've had this great career. And I said, okay, well, I can help you on this one because I do have competition. So let me ask you a question. Are you constantly comparing yourself with other people? And he said, well, sometimes. I said, no, that isn't the question. The question is, are you constantly comparing yourself with other people? And he went, well, I do. I play in all these squash leagues. I said, no, you're not getting the question. Are you constantly comparing yourself? And he said, no, I'm not. Because actually, when you talked earlier, Jen, and you said, can it be heavy? And I said, no. Of course, that was a bit of a glib response because the truth is it can be. Maybe I've learned how to tone it down. I don't know. Perhaps I'm just in a role where you can express your competition more than you can in other roles. But Yeah, I that's what I've seen, actually. I think it shows up consistently, but people don't understand how it looks like, because you can compete, as you say, using other themes other than competition.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, when I first got my CliftonStrengths, all my team was shocked that I didn't have competition in my top 5, and we didn't know my full 34, and that it was all the way, almost all the way at the bottom when I got them. But because I was number 1 a lot, but it was the responsibility and the achiever that pushed me to. I didn't really care to be actually at number 1. I just wanted to do the best work, which we've talked about before, that's not the same as winning.
Competition was a byproduct for you there, wasn't it?
Right.
Of
Yeah.
actually all the other, sort of responsibility and execution themes that you've got that focused you on doing the best job you could do.
Well, and belief likes knowing that I did the best job the best way.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Where I work, we spend a lot of time helping people who, like 40% of our workforce has been here under 2 years. We've just grown significantly. And we verbally speak out loud about what winning looks like when you come to work here. Because my version of winning at competition, I trip myself up and I've been here 15 years. I've tripped myself up so often where I thought winning was, like you said, Kevin, every argument or every decision. And sometimes winning means you're right, but not right now. And so I think individuals with competition, it's really important to understand the game at which they're coming to the table for and how to win, because you can quickly fail very fast if you have a different idea of what that looks like.
Oh.
That's really powerful.
I think the other thing I would say, just sort of reflecting on this, is that sometimes and often, depending on the activity, it's actually a really good thing to be last. I think it was one of Simon Sinek's books, where he said, leaders always speak last. Leaders always speak last in an important meeting.
And Kevin, to that point, I think we get more value from our losses than maybe anybody else. We remember them more than anyone else.
Yeah, we definitely do that.
You've even described, I think, some of your major losses in life, and I can point to those huge moments in life that I lost, and you reflect oftentimes on them, and I hope learn from them, because you intensely don't want that to happen again.
Well, I think the old definition of insanity is doing the same thing time and time again and expecting a different result, isn't it?
Yes.
I have done that a couple of times in my life, but hopefully not so much recently.
Wow, that was a very interesting place for that question to go. But I'm so glad we had that conversation, because it just adds another layer of understanding around this thing. I was reflecting as you were talking about the versions of competition. Jen and I have been sort of self-deprecating about our very low ranking for this theme, but it's coming from a different place. I have high responsibility. So, Sam, you were talking about free throws before. I love to take free throws, but it comes, I practice them relentlessly because it comes from a place of responsibility. I don't want to be the guy on the line at the end of the game that can't hit a free throw. And yes, I want to help my team win, but it comes from a different place of, it's not letting somebody down, versus for you, it's the spotlight, it's the pressure, it's I love the moment because this is where I could compete best. And so that wrapped into the conversation about how this competition plays out, or sort of seems to show up, but when it's really not the theme. And the theme is what Kevin was saying, is that constant comparison. That is one of my true takeaways from this conversation, is it's that comparison. Sam, you alluded to it before, of there has to be another person involved. It can't be just self-oriented. So I really appreciate you adding a ton to that. I would like to ask the next question, and this is going to take it to a slightly later place, as much weight and awesome, delving into this as we've done. some people are still just getting a handle on what this theme looks like, as sort of, maybe they work with somebody that has competition, or they've just gotten their reports. And while the rest of this podcast definitely adds a ton of detail to it, I'm wondering if there might be an entry point to this theme through maybe an image or a pop reference culture, the pop culture reference. Sorry, I got my order. My communication was not showing up there, Kevin. Reference that people might be able to associate with this competition theme. I'm just wondering if there's an image that you would use to highlight this theme. Sam, you look like you're either deep in thought or have something ready to share. I can't quite tell which.
Maybe first thing that comes to mind is we've talked a lot about sports here, a lot about winning, but for me, it's a ladder. And so it's the constant upward movement of what's next, what can I win? There's still something a little unsatisfying of that in, the motivation behind it all, because I think the driver behind it all, even the comparison factor, is missing in the ladder. But ladder kind of is something that first jumps up to me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Kevin, image
Well,
or
no, I've got to try and do better, haven't I?
Look at them go. Look at them go. All right. I feel like I'm in the stadium. I'm a spectator. I'm watching these two compete with each other.
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? I actually think the image behind me on the screen is a good one. For those of listening in audio, what we got is a bridge. Actually, it's called the Clifton Suspension Bridge, not named after Don Clifton, the founder of the Strengths movement, but named after the place where it is in Bristol. Bridges connect people and places. Strengths connect people and places. Above the bridge, you're going to see some balloons, because there's a hot air balloon festival in Bristol every year. And I guess competition would probably want to be the one that was highest up in the sky and the furthest away from you.
Nice.
I love
Jen?
that bridge. It's
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful image.
Yeah.
Chad, mine's really boring because I don't know what I'm talking about. So, for me, it was always like getting the trophy or the gold medal, or, just winning in general. So I think of Charlie Sheen winning, his little catchphrase back then.
Charlie Sheen. I haven't heard much of him for a while. He was in the press for a lot of bad reasons.
I know he was for a long time, and he was always in trouble. What about you, Chad?
I was going to go with the same sort of idea. I have an affinity for both F1, Formula One racing, which I'm sure will resonate with my British counterpart here. But also World Rally, the off-road rally that they do a lot of in Europe, some here in the US. But just the idea of having a timed lapse, who's got the best time for the single lap in the race, who's coming in at the end, the big celebrations you see, you think, like Le Mans, you've got the big champagne bottles and everybody's looking up at a stage, and so that maybe that's tapping into a little bit of that significant self-assurance piece as well, but just that awarding something at the end and celebrating it.
I still think mine was better, to be fair. Can we have a vote on this?
We'll let our listeners and our
okay, let's put it out to the audience.
Vote.
Yes, right.
Yeah, we'd like to
absolutely.
be judged. I'm sure Sam and I would like
we do.
We do.
And Chad and I will pull
Damn, they had a
ourselves
better one than me. A
out of
metaphor,
that competition.
A better metaphor than mine. Can't believe
And
it.
communication is super low too. How does that feel, Kevin?
Well, it does. Well, see, the worry for me is that the balloons are full of hot air, which often can be another metaphor for communication. But we're not here to talk about that, are we? It's competition.
Okay. Well, so with this, we always like to kind of start to wrap up the show with a specific question about helping others who have competition high. So if we think about how others might interact best with you or others who have competition high, what advice would you give to team leaders or peers to help someone bring out the best of their competition theme? Kevin, you look like you're ready.
I am. I'm ready to go. Well, sales, obviously, perhaps obviously, is a very goal-driven activity where you tend to focus much more on the destination than the journey. And you can find yourself not enjoying the trip because you're so focused on, I must hit that quarter end, I must hit that month end, I must hit that year end target. It can become quite draining. So I think the advice I would give to leaders, and I do give to sales leaders, a lot of whom have competition themselves, and many of their salespeople have it as well, is to always make sure that everybody has at least one secondary goal, probably two secondary goals. We used to call those management by objectives in the old days. So that's I think that's very common where you want to incentivize non-sales people, but I think for salespeople they need something else to shoot at as well. Some degree of excellence, some proficiency in a skill that they've acquired, because you can still compete and be the best and beat the rest with multiple goals, as long as they're not too complicated.
That's great advice.
I'm
Yeah,
changing my
Sam?
answer.
Oh, you haven't even answered yet, and
I
you're
know,
already changing your
know.
answer.
In
I
my
love
head,
it.
I'm changing it because I think to play on what Kevin mentioned, because of the comparison that's happening when there's a failure. Failures are somewhat impactful and definite. And so, but most of what we're judged on, our actions are judged on are how we handle that failure and second attempts. And so maybe somebody with competition is understanding that second attempts are sometimes more important than winning at the first attempt. And hopefully that will help some of the quitting before starting or quitting after one failure type component that attaches itself along to competition.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, really great. Yeah, really great. Is there, so you kind of tapped on it too. Is there a way, like something you can help someone who's got competition high, they want to go only for those goals they can win. They're maybe plowing over everyone else to get there. Is there advice you might give to those with competition to help them kind of tamper that or bring it back?
Isn't that where theme dynamics comes in, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Reaching to something, because that would be an overuse, which actually is a weakness in Gallup's definition. It's true, isn't it? My wife went for a job interview today, by the way, and she was asked what her strengths were and what her weaknesses were. And competition isn't anywhere in her list either. It's like way down. but I know that when she speaks to me, my competition can really upset her sometimes, because I just I just want to barrel on. It's a kind of a moving forward, driving sort of theme. And so in my case, again, relator helps me to understand this is a really important relationship to me. We met at university, my wife and I. We've been married for 40 years in November. How about that?
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you. Now, how did we manage to sustain that for such a long period of time? And me being quite an egotistical, driven sort of individual, if I hadn't instinctively understood that I needed to tone that down, balance it out, and have a regard for other people. Have a regard for other people, not just about yourself.
Yeah, it's good.
And I would say understanding and valuing long-term winning. And this might be personal for me. I have things like activator and command, and so a lot of impatient themes. So winning in the moment usually never gets you a long-term win. And so it's understanding the patience. Kevin mentioned leaders usually go last. It's the patient of the long-term win that might be losing a lot of smaller battles in the process.
It's just an interesting connection I just made between your image contribution. You said you really weren't sure about the end of the ladder, and that's ever increasing. But I think your comment there about the long game is actually a really nice add-on to that ladder, as you're piling wins together, but with a long-term larger goal in mind. And I think so. Anyway, I know you were completely satisfied with your ladder metaphor or the ladder image, but I think that you just added to it. And I think that you just made an even better connection between those two. So yeah, I could definitely see the long game. Kevin, you and I have talked about competition before a little bit. You said something to me about celebrating the moments along the way had some sort of impact for you in competition. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that with our listeners?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to. I'll give a very specific example, Chad. When I set myself on the course of becoming a Gallup-Strengths coach, it was purely by accident. A company had asked me to take the assessment. I would never have taken it anyway. As it turns out, most salespeople are pretty much the same, not remotely interested in discovering more about their talents, but that's a different story. So when I set myself on the course of becoming a strengths coach, and obviously competition high, I needed to have some goals to shoot for. So I set myself 2 goals. One was to be the most commercially successful strengths coach. I think I said just in the UK. Wasn't into global domination at that point. And the other was, luckily, I had a second goal. Because the first one has not been achieved, I can tell you. I know that because I know who the more successful coaches are, and I'm not one of them financially. But the other one was to be the best strengths coach in the UK. Now, you could say that was a poorly defined goal. I would agree with you. Definitely not a smart goal in any sense. But it did enable me to have a qualitative measure as well as a quantitative measure. And I can satisfy myself by taking the time to learn and study and deliver the best quality coaching, even if I haven't made a ton of money doing it.
Sure. Nice. Okay. Thank you. This has been fantastic in terms of the awareness I now have around this theme. I hope everybody has listened to the whole episode, but as we do wrap up here, I want to have the two of you help us sort of wrap the show in terms of offering maybe your 2 or 3 top takeaways that you would either want to re-emphasize something that we've already shared, or that maybe is something that we needed to cover, but maybe Jen and my questions didn't quite touch on. But if you could give us your 2 or 3 takeaways, so that if we ever decide to do maybe shorts, that we could sort of publish this section as its own standalone, so that people really have an intro to the competition theme on its own. Sam, what would be your first 2 or 3 takeaways that you'd really want to highlight out of this conversation?
I think one is that competition, it's interesting because we don't often experience competition looking much different than what we're speaking about here today. But then all of a sudden you throw in all the themes around it, and it changes it very significantly, whether it comes to motivation or how the work gets done. And so it's one of those that is pretty simple on its own, and then off is bolstered and really brought to light through the things that, and that probably goes for a lot of the strengths itself. But competition, I think, is somewhat simple in nature, and so the others are really when it starts to get fun, when you surround them with other components. And then I would say the second piece is about goal setting. And thanks, Kevin, for bringing that in and setting secondary goals, maybe setting longer term goals. I've never been a person that sets goals. I don't like that word at all. And so I just see the next thing and I go get it kind of naturally. But I think being intentional and being very clear and transparent with what winning is a way to really harness competition in a nice way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those wrap-up points. I think those are great. Kevin, what would you put as your 2 or 3 key takeaways for people that really understand about this theme?
That was one occasion where I was happy to go second. Gave me a chance to think and scribble down answers. So thanks, Sam. I got 3 great takeaways for you. You won't get better than these 3 takeaways, trust me. The first one, genuinely, It's been a very pleasurable conversation. And Sam, it's been so good to speak to someone who's actually is quite similar to me, because I think we share at least 6, maybe 7 in our top 10. That's not a usual experience for me, even in the sales field, actually, and certainly in the Gallup strengthening community. The first time I went to a Gallup meetup and I had my top 5 on a badge, people just couldn't believe it. That was like, God, we don't meet many people like you. So it actually, I think the reflection is, it's really interesting, not just to speak and learn from people that are different to you, but people that are quite similar to you in the strengths lineup, because it expresses itself in different ways, particularly when you've got someone like Sam, who's not in sales, is in a totally different field. So that's one takeaway. The next one is that every time I have a conversation like this, and obviously as a coach, we don't have that many conversations like this, because we're there paid to listen to other people expressing their strengths. I find I get more and more out of it. So I think the reflection is, strengths is a lifetime journey. Right? It takes time. The third one is, if you want to accelerate that journey, get a coach.
Absolutely.
I think we would all second that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to be the first to, I'm going to be first to thank you all for coming on our show to talk about your strengths, for being open and vulnerable with us and our audience, because some people are just on their journey. They're just starting out and they never thought of any of these things before. Others have been battling it and struggling and doing their best and trying to win everything all the time and not realizing why, and now just have finally understood that, from the lens of seeing it through others. Like you said, Kevin, we learn so much from talking to someone else who's similar to us. Chad and I, it's the reason we started this podcast. Our responsibility and deliberative shared talents, we realized that those flavor everything we do, everything we talk about. Yeah. So we wanted to share that with others. So, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us.
Yeah, I will just second that. This has been an absolute delight and very educational. My learner is all jazzed up right now. My learner is number 1. So I love asking questions and then hearing all this great information. So thank you very much for sharing. I do want to turn our attention now a little bit to our viewers and listeners and just say that if you really like this episode or want to engage in further in this conversation, or as Sam and Kevin have both put out there, if you want to participate in a small poll about whose answers were better, feel free to leave us a comment or a review, or if you're on LinkedIn, we'd love for you to add to the conversation when as you see this on your thread. We also encourage you to subscribe to either Jen or Maya's YouTube channels. It helps all the bots out there help others find great information like that, like those points that Sam and Kevin have shared with us today, and all of our other episodes. So just please engage with all of us. We'd love to hear what you have to say, whether you agree or disagree, or maybe have a different flavor on the competition theme that we've talked about today.
And if you want to get in touch with our guest coaches, we've included their contact information down in the show notes. You can find them. And finally, if you want to get in touch with either of us, Chad or myself, please use our respective links, and you can find those in the show notes.
And so if you, so I guess to wrap it up, until next time, I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting, encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths.
And I'm Jen Werner from Jen Werner Coaching, encouraging you to be uniquely you. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.